All right. I'm with Laura Delano, everybody. Welcome to Walk-ins Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Bridget.
It's so good to see you again. Now we've met in person. Now we are doing this virtually. I wish we could have done it in person because I always prefer it. I think the interviews are just better with no time delay on laughing and jokes and whatnot. But I'm excited to still talk to you. I think you have a book that is out that is really capturing the zeitgeist of this movement with Maha. And as you and I were talking about even before we logged in and started recording, this probably would have come about anyway. So everybody who's listening, her book is called Unshrunk, a story of psychiatric treatment resistance. Everybody should go click and buy it and read it. But tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book.
My inspiration came, I think, just from recognizing that the 14 years I spent growing up as a psychiatric patient, basically through my teens and 20s, were what happened to me during those years was far more common than I originally thought. When I left all of it behind in my late 20s, by which I mean I decided I didn't want to be on these medications anymore. I didn't want to identify with any of the diagnoses that I'd been given. I was so overwhelmed and disoriented by what had just happened in those previous years, and also by where to go from there, because I'd grown up psychiatrized, as I like to put it. And it wasn't long before I realized that, yeah, what happened to me is about much more than just me. This is about our culture's, deep relationship to quick fixes. This is about this spiritual, this kind of eternal spiritual quest to understand what it means to suffer and to go mad and to break down. And I knew I needed to take what I'd been through and turn it into something that might help someone else. And I think, of course, too, to make sense of what had happened. So I knew I would write a book one day, but it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I actually set out to do it.
And what was it like writing the book for you to have to go back and relive a lot of that? One of the cool things about this book is that you have all of your like psychiatric records that you intersperse throughout it. And was that hard? Is that weird? Or were you able to kind of detach and look at it from a journalistic, almost like you were an explorer?
Because I didn't return to write the book until about 10 years after I left the mental health system, I was able to approach it more as a journalist. Had I tried to do this in the first 5 years, 6 years, even 7 years out, I don't think I would have had that perspective. I knew that I needed to take whatever time it took to be able to revisit my past, revisit my records without having that without having emotional activation. Obviously, it's very emotional, and I poured my emotions into the book, but I knew I needed to be able to see my records and understand what they meant, and approach the whole thing without it really as though I was looking at another woman's past. And because I started writing about my experiences early on, way back in 2010, I started a blog called Recovery. Well, I eventually renamed it Recovering from Psychiatry. I'd been writing about my experiences for so many years that it didn't it wasn't hard in the sense that it like opened up old wounds or anything like that. I think if anything, what was hardest was all the cutting I had to do with the wonderful help of my editor, because there was so much I wanted to say, and there were so many angles I wanted to explore, and kind of facets of my experience that I wanted to dive into that I just didn't have the space to dive into. So that was hard, was what to cut, what to omit and not speak about.
Yeah. That seems like it would be. It's weird. I was thinking a lot about this. There's so much that your book brings up for me because I really relate to like, I got there, but through a different way. I was basically exposed to a lot of this, and then I became very, like, terrified of meds, and even when I went into rehab, they wanted to put me on meds, and I was said no because I mean, I felt like that's what I was doing with drugs, and I'm like, "If I really just wanted to do drugs, I would go do heroin, so no thanks." Um, because heroin is amazing. I don't know if you guys know this, but it it wasn't, and then I watched, like, in horror as a lot of these kind of brilliant women who are in recovery, but recovery's tough, and from drug addiction, and as you start to kind of wake up, a lot of people with a lot of, like, schizophrenia and whatever other things would pop up or really bad, significant trauma, and they would medicate these women into literally wheelchairs, like, just basically drooling shells of themselves, and one day they would just kinda get rolled out, and I have no idea where they went, and I was only 19, and that was very influential, and I had been coming from my teen years of growing up under what sounds like a very similar experience to what you went through, like having a primary care provider who was in and out of mental institutions, on and off of lithium, diagnosed many different multiple things in some of the best rehabs in the country and the best psychiatric units in the country, and it was, I often felt like they were just using them as a guinea pig, and it didn't seem like things would work and things would be good and then things would be bad, and, yeah, I probably knew way too much about what was going on as a young child as well, so, um I totally identify with it, but that informed me so much to basically overcorrecting that I dated when I was dating somebody who was on meds, I, like, freaked out about it, and I was like, "You've gotta get off meds," and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I don't know what I'm doing, and it caused a lot of anxiety and fear for me, and it was really my issue, and I've ended up having to make, like, amends to that person because I had no business trying to, you know, encourage them to get off their meds, not knowing what they were going through, and it was really just my overreaction to, uh, what sounds like exactly what you went through, actually. So I understand it, but do you have any is there any good that you took from any of it?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I totally relate to that, reactionary place you found yourself in, and I think it took me a while to find a nuanced perspective on this because
Mhm.
when you've been through something really traumatic, when the people you've turned to for help have inadvertently caused you harm, it I think it's part of the process of reckoning and grieving to swing to an extreme where to feel like you're free from it, you need to be against it and you know, in this black and white way, oh, it's this is, you know, my enemy, this is bad, no one should ever do what I did. I was totally there. It's like it sounds like you were
Yeah.
at some point too. And I think I needed enough space and time and actual like physiological healing. Like my brain needed to heal enough from all the years of so many meds and a lot of booze and a lot of coke and a lot of other stuff to actually recognize like um how this is so not a black and white, good or bad, right or wrong issue here, but our culture tries to make it that, unfortunately. And that really this is about choice. Like, what does it take to make a truly informed choice about whether and how to engage with the mental health system? And I wasn't given the information that I needed, nor were my parents, to make a true choice about any of it. So I view what happened to me as really a kind of insidious like coercion, just because we weren't, you know, I was told this kind of this typical line that, oh, your intense despair and the fact that you're cutting yourself and the fact that you're having these rages and these, you know, inabilities to regulate yourself means you have this incurable brain disease called bipolar disorder. something's wrong with your brain chemicals, and for the rest of your life, you'll need to take meds. When you're being told that story, which is just like completely unscientific, the chemical imbalance theory is mythology, you can't make a true choice. And so for me, my work and my book, and whenever I speak about this issue, like what I'm trying to convey is that life is complicated, life is hard. People are doing the best they can with the resources they have at their disposal. Taking a psychiatric drug might be the totally right decision for you, but it's about, are you being given unbiased, straightforward information about the diagnoses you're being given and the treatments you're being offered? If you're not, you need to be given that information, or else it's not possible to truly choose. And I will say that a lot of my book, like, interestingly enough, has gotten a lot of coverage from kind of legacy media, you know, in New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Washington Post. Some of it's been really positive, some of it's been vitriolic. And I will say that a lot of the vitriolic coverage, I find myself wondering, like, did you read my book? Because it does, you know, people are trying to paint me as an anti-medication person, or as a pill shamer, or as a denier of, you know, suffering, which hurts my heart because I'm very much not any of those things. But I think it's just so hard for our culture right now to have nuance, to be able to talk about the complexities of being human in a way that isn't just, you know, these rigid categories and boxes and you know, value sets, but is rather about like how complicated all of this is. and how, you know, at the end of the day, it's who am I to think that I know what someone else needs? Just like you realized in retrospect with your ex, like, who the fuck was I to think I knew whether this person should take a medication or not? But it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, and it was so much of my own stuff coming up, and I think like there was also a job that I had. I was working as a yoga instructor, and then I was working as like a life coach, which is hilarious on its face if you knew what my life looked like at that moment. But that's, I think, all life coaches. And and then I was working with kids. So I started with working with autistic kids, and then it led into just working with kids who were slipped through the cracks, didn't fit in normal systems. Most of them were very wealthy. So their parents had thrown a lot of attempted treatments at them, and I worked at one of these schools that's insanely expensive, and the kids got one-on-one schooling, basically, like one-on-one teaching, and all of these kids could list what they'd been diagnosed with. They were not even 16 years old. These were like preteens and early teens, and they were on like 9 medications, and some of the kids were as young as 10, 11 years old, or maybe, I guess the youngest was probably like 11 or 12. And I would ask him, you know, like, "What were you diagnosed with?" And he's like, "Oh, oppositional defiance disorder." It's like, "Oh, so you're a 12-year-old boy or whatever age you are? Like, you're also just" some of the stuff, and this is stuff that I really wanna do jokes about, is just how so much of the stuff feels like we're just, "Oh, so you have a school system that hasn't evolved at all in like 100 years, and then you've got restless kids, and they're the problem, not the lazy teachers who" not all teachers are lazy, but some teachers are, and they will roll out, you know, a video to play for the kids, and then when the kids act out, it's their fault, instead of like engaging the mind, or better yet, taking a look at really how we can revolutionize our school systems entirely, which is another topic entirely. And so you have like this. I mean, I grew up really at what was that book that came out that was the one that Angelina Jolie, it was huge.
Girl Interrupted.
Girl Interrupted. That was like, I was totally of that age. When I went into rehab, they put me, my parents, because they had a lot of experience with mental wards, put me in a mental ward first, and my roommate was a cutter. And that was like, I feel like that was a really big rage around our generation.
Yeah.
And now they're just like full on cutting parts of their body off. It's
Yeah.
evolved. um but that was like the dawn of all of this. I felt like everybody was like Prozac Nation was huge, and
Yep.
that was it was like everywhere, but
Yep.
it was really like the dawn of it. What I feel like we lived, so a lot of the diagnoses felt really just like, you get a diagnosis, you get a diagnosis, you get a because it wasn't bipolar really being kind of wildly overdiagnosed when you were going through this?
Yep. Yeah, this was in the mid 90s, and it was
Oh,
right
yeah.
as Prozac Nation was coming out, and Prozac had come to market in the late 80s, and there were a handful of very prominent drug company funded psychiatrists affiliated with Harvard Medical School who began in the early mid 90s publishing papers talking about this, previously undiagnosed epidemic of juvenile bipolar disorder. And what they claimed had made it hard to recognize previously was that mania in children looks different than in adults. In adults, you think you're Jesus Christ, your phones are being tapped, whatever kind of delusions or unusual experiences you might be having. In kids, however, mania looks like anger outbursts and irritability and emotional instability. And so there I was as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old girl. I was overwhelmed by anger because I was waking up to the intense expectations I felt on my shoulders as a kid growing up in a wealthy New England town, going to an all-girls private school, kind of surrounded by all these seemingly, successful people. I was waking up to how bullshit it all was, and this performance game I was in. So I was angry about it, and I was acting out. And I was also feeling like totally despairing about how powerless I was to do anything about it and how meaningless it all felt. And so, there I was, this angry, irritable, depressed, self-injuring kid sitting in front of a psychiatrist for literally 1 hour who probably read those articles that were being published by this industry-funded key opinion leader. And there, bam, I got a bipolar label within one session. And yeah, you're right that that skyrocketed. I think it was like 400% into the 2000s. The rate increased of diagnosing young people with bipolar.
You've all heard me screaming women for years now, and I'm a big advocate for women in general and women's health in particular. That's why I love Quest's line of medical tests specifically focused on women's health issues. They offer a basic women's health profile test that gives you a snapshot of your current health and wellness, women's hormone tests designed to identify imbalances associated with various health conditions, and specific tests for fertility, thyroid function, and even your menopause stage. This is all such important knowledge for women to have because it can affect the way you work out. It can affect what you should be eating. And just now they're starting to really realize how much all of these hormones play into us losing weight, keeping bone density. All of this information is so important to you. Your results are delivered online quickly and discreetly, and you get all of this information without a doctor's visit. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALKINS25 to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALKINS25 for 25% off. Link in the description below. Was it more women than men?
That's a good question. I don't actually know those stats in the 90s. I mean, I know generally these diagnoses are very gendered, and especially the borderline diagnosis, which I eventually acquired along the way. But I don't know about the juvenile bipolar disorder diagnosis specifically. That's a good question.
I'm really curious because it feels a little bit like the hysteria label that they would slap on women just reborn with meds.
Yep.
I think it's because I've been watching Mad Men and now I'm obsessed with that entire like
what
Mommy's
season
Little
are you
Helper.
in?
I've never watched it. Can I tell you that watching Mad Men in 2025 is amazing? Like, I'm glad I waited this long. I'm only in season 1.
Oh,
I'm in, like, the
I'm
first
so jealous.
5 episodes.
I have my husband. I watched it many years ago, and he's never seen it. So we're in. I mean, we don't have. It's taking a long time, but I think we're in season 4 now, and I'm so jealous that you get to have your inaugural Mad Men experience. Oh, the best show.
Did you watch it as it was like, it was such a cultural phenomenon, and I have reasons I couldn't watch it, but it was, like, massively huge. Were you watching it with everyone else
I think I was.
in real time?
Yeah, I was, and I think I was pretty early in psychiatric drug withdrawal, so it's all pretty blurry, but I'm pretty sure I watched it as it was coming out. I think it was like the early 2010s, right? I think.
Psychiatric drug withdrawal is so fucking gnarly. It is insane how gnarly it is. It's terrifying. So I've managed to resist them. I resisted them when I was in rehab. I was like, no way. And then I went through many years. When I got out, I was sober for a little while, but then got back onto doing drugs and cocaine and all this stuff and weed. I was like always self-medicating with weed for decades. And weed withdrawal is actually pretty gnarly too. But nothing like benzos and what I've seen friends go through who were coming off that, or people who tried to do it on their own and didn't taper, or just, it's like, I don't know how. And I watched what they did with, like, this is what's so crazy to me and infuriating as someone who worked with kids who already have a brain that we don't understand, autism, and then throwing these meds that they don't seem to really understand how they're going to interact with every individual and their brain chemistry. Then in the middle of puberty,
Yep.
which is like your brain is just being bathed in hormones. It's
Yep.
so insane to me that it's even allowed.
Yep. Well,
I mean, I understand why it is allowed, but it does feel just like you're really throwing a lot of shit against the wall to see what's going to stick.
You're totally right. And this to me is, again, where the informed choice comes in, because no one ever told my parents, and certainly not me as a 13, 14-year-old kid, that these drugs I was about to be put on, weren't even approved at the time for psychiatric use in kids. This was, back then it was Prozac and Depakote, which is an anticonvulsant that's marketed as a mood stabilizer. Neither of those drugs were approved for use in kids. Prozac did come later, but not at the time. And Depakote to this day is still not approved for psychiatric reasons in kids. And no one also told us that these drugs are only studied in the short term in all the trials that get submitted to the FDA, like 6 to 8 weeks on average. And so there I was on these drugs for a decade and a half. There's zero evidence base that it's safe or effective to do that, let alone take multiple of them at a time. And so again, this isn't me saying no one should take these drugs ever, but it's me saying, if you aren't being told this prior to you starting a drug, and certainly if you aren't being told, this Zoloft that I'm about to put you on for, work-related stress, or this divorce, or whatever it might be, like, by the way, if you take it for more than a few weeks, your brain may become physiologically dependent on it, and it might take you years to taper off it successfully, because if you go faster than years, your whole life is going to blow up. People aren't being told this, and so that's what I really think, that to me is what it comes down to. Is anyone actually making a true choice here about any of this? Because I have yet to meet a person who told me, oh yeah, at the very beginning, before I started this med, I was walked through all of these possible consequences. No, you're told, oh, you might have a few weeks of side effects, like some, headaches or some fatigue, but you'll adjust. Like that was the extent of the information I was really given about the risks. And just to quickly return to the withdrawal topic, I believe that a huge part of the reason why there are currently like tens upon tens of millions of Americans on psychiatric meds for years is because when people try to stop them and they feel like shit and they can't function and they can't sleep and they're having panic attacks and they're totally depressed, no energy, they're being told, oh, you're having a relapse of your illness. This is why you need to be on your meds. And then they go back on. and they feel better and they think, oh, wow, my med is really helping me. They're not being told you're actually in withdrawal. And if you tapered really slowly, it might look different. I think long-term use is often because people try and they just feel horrible when they stop. And so they think to themselves, I just need to be on this indefinitely, I guess.
And they don't tell you too, like, they'll be like, oh, you should feel good in 2 weeks, it'll start kicking in or whatever. And then it's like, oh, but no, there's some people who actually in 2 weeks feel worse when they go on Prozac. And then you have to kind of break through that in order to really start feeling better at 30 days. And then because one thing that my therapist explained to me that I didn't fully understand was when used correctly, meds will, especially in adults, let's take off like teenagers and people whose brains are developing. And a fully developed adult's brain, the meds would make them more than my fear was always because I grew up with a lot of insanity when the person would come off the meds, they'd be fucking crazy town.
Mm-hmm.
And this person probably does have a lot of mental illness, but so I was always worried that the meds were just hiding the or keeping the crazy at bay. That was what I associated meds with. And it took me until my probably 40s to understand that when they're used correctly in the right dose, meds make you feel, especially with something like depression, more like yourself. They'll make you more the person that you are, not hiding the crazy. And this was always the fear when I was dating people, is that if they went off their meds, like suddenly they'd be insane. And I've now been with known people and been with people who have used them to get through a time very conservatively, tapered very carefully, and there's like no difference at all in the person that they were on the meds, which did help them to get kind of above like that fog, because depression is also very terrifying in that once you're in that fog and you like that brain that what's the whole thing, like the brain that has the problem can't find the solution. So I think I used to go hiking all the time in LA, and on those days when it was really foggy and I'd go up to the top of Temescal, you would get above the clouds and you'd be in all this fog hiking and then you'd be above it. And I'm like, this is exactly like depression. And when you get out of it, you're like, oh, there's sunshine and blue sky. And you don't see that at all when you're in that fog. And I think sometimes I've had family members and friends who have had very brilliant people who are like, we're just going to like up the dose incrementally until we get you to a place where you feel better. And that's where we'll stay. We're not going to put you on the recommended 20, whatever, like ridiculous dose that there is. So I think there are ways to do it and situational ways, but now it just seems like, yeah, you can go to your like primary care provider and they'll be like, here, try this out.
Oh my gosh. And the majority of psychiatric drugs are prescribed by primary care doctors, which is
that's crazy.
Crazy.
Why does the guy even go to school?
It's so wild. Yeah. And I think you're making such a good point that these drugs can be used in ways that feel really helpful. And the framework that's been most kind of clarifying for me, and I think straightforward in understanding how these drugs can be helpful, is that the language we use to think about them and talk about them is this medicalized language. So you have this illness called depression and you're treating it with this medicine. And that kind of implies like there's some kind of pathology in you that this drug is treating. That's really more like marketing language. It doesn't come from the research divisions of these drug companies. You could say it's much more from the marketing side. But when you talk about these drugs as, they act on the central nervous system, they act on the serotonin system and the dopamine system and the norepinephrine system, the GABA system. These are the systems that obviously, regulate and shape our emotions and our thoughts, but also all of our body, like all of the basic functionings of our body too. And when you take a drug that acts on any of these systems, those effects, the effects that you have from kind of interfering with that function can actually be helpful. Like you might feel like your mind is a bit quieter, or you have more energy, or you feel more clarity, or, but it's not because it's fixing pathology. I think that's where, to me, the misleading story comes in about what these drugs are. And when you talk about them in these more straightforward ways, they're psychoactive chemicals, just like
Yeah.
coffee and heroin and booze and coke. And all of these drugs can feel helpful and they can be helpful, but it's not because you have like an alcohol deficiency that the glass of wine helps you feel less anxious. You know what I mean? And so I think the language itself is where I think a lot of the problem is, because the language shapes how we think and talk and conceptualize these drugs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're the big concept in your book is the kind of psychiatrization and being psychiatrized. I've always just called it being therapized growing
Mm.
up, but psychiatrized is probably more accurate. Um, Tell me about this kind of theory that you dive into.
So yeah, to me, psychiatrization is a process that really has like two main components to it. One is you are taught to interpret your own mental and emotional experiences through a medical lens. So instead of, looking at my like intense anger and despair as like meaningful responses to the environment that I was in, I came to see them as symptoms of an illness. So it's this medicalization piece where your kind of human experiences are being retranslated as medical conditions, which then opens you up to the kind of second component of psychiatrization, which I think is probably similar to your therapization concept, which is that if you're thinking of yourself as having a medical problem, you're going to turn to medical and mental health professionals to help you address it. And I'm not against that, by the way. Let me just be clear at the gates. Like, some of my best friends are psychiatrists and therapists and all of that. But the problem with, especially when you're young, like I was, and you're being told your emotional pain is a symptom of an illness that needs treatment, you come to, and sometimes this happens in insidious ways, you come to believe that the only help that makes sense for you is from a professional who's basically like paid
Mhm.
to provide you with a service. And that's what happened to me. Is I was in this critical moment in my life, hitting puberty, waking up to the fucked upness of the world, to self and all of its, like prison bars. And I was in this really profound, meaningful spiritual crisis, really. And I ended up getting funneled in. And God bless my parents. They were terrified. I was like slicing up my arms and talking about killing myself. Like, of course
Yeah.
they're going to freak out. So they did what made sense to them. I completely get it. But I was funneled into this medicalized, like professionalized world where my whole identity became enmeshed with being a patient. And I think I was the beginning of what is now this like ubiquitous TikTok phenomenon, where girls grow up deeply identified with their diagnoses, using this lens to shape how they see themselves and the world around them, and then coming to rely really almost exclusively on paid professionals to help them find their way through the world, instead of their friend group or like an older kid who can be kind of a mentor or an elder in their family.
Or
And so,
God.
oh God, totally. And so where I take issue with this with the mental health industry, you could say, is that I think it's taken on like a monopoly. It is a bit of a monopoly on help, what constitutes help. I'm all for
Yeah.
therapy, but people should grow up realizing you could see a mental health professional, or you could check out this like mutual aid group in your community center, or an AA meeting, or your
A lot
neighborhood
of people have the
potluck
same
dinner.
issue with AA though, and I understand it because they don't wanna identify as an alcoholic, like the whole, ritual of being like, "I'm Bridget, I'm an alcoholic," or whatever. I get that. I understand, because in a similar way, you're identifying with your problem, and now that's defines you forever. This like, I'm this alcoholic, and I wish that, like, I don't really deeply identify with I don't have that same resistance to it because I'm Irish. So I'm definitely an alcoholic. It's not being an alcoholic, it's just my Irish genes. But there is something, people will always say to me like, "Well, have you just tried having one?" Yeah, I fucking tried that. You don't think I tried that many times? You don't think I was the girl that would raise my hand and was like, "I'll be a sober cab," and never was, and that so much that it became the joke amongst our friends? This was pre-Uber, guys. You don't think that so it became obvious to me, not soon enough, frankly, that abstinence is truly the path. It is the only path that is somewhat manageable for me, because I start drinking and some fucking gremlin wakes up and then I don't have an off switch. It's like, I see the way I am with sweets. My husband and I met in recovery, and we always joke, we're like, just the way we are about, like, sourdough bread is enough for us to be like, we can never start using drugs or drinking. Like, we clear even coffee, like,
Yeah.
I quit coffee for for something. I might have been pregnant, or I was doing some ridiculous diet. I forget what it was, but I quit coffee and I was like, no joke, suicidal in a way that I haven't been since like early sobriety. And I was like, you're not taking this from me. But I
Yep.
have addict tendencies even about coffee. It'll be
Yep.
late at night and I'll be like, I want a coffee. And it's just my brain wanting that fix. So
Yep.
I
Yeah.
just
Well,
know what my boundaries are with that stuff, but I deeply understand why people wouldn't wanna identify as an alcoholic for the rest of their life.
yeah. I mean, I actually I go into that in my book because I spent a few years really, really active in the 12-step world. And it's like quitting drinking was actually what catalyzed my eventual process of coming off all my meds. Because when you're on, you know, heavy doses of benzos and antidepressants and antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, and you're downing 1 to 2 bottles of wine a night, like that's a recipe to not be thinking very clearly. And so I
Yeah.
quit drinking, and then within a month I was like super, yeah, I was like really struggling in a dark place, but I had enough clarity of mind to realize like, wow, I don't actually know who I am. Who would I be off of all these meds I've been on since I was a
Yeah.
kid? And I'm so grateful to the 12-step world. It was my, I mean, God, I'm filled with gratitude for everything it provided me in the first like 3 years of my sobriety, because I had spent, the most formative years of my life kind of deferring everything and outsourcing all of my, kind of responsibility over myself and my actions and the way I made sense of myself. I'd outsourced it all to psychiatry, really. And so
Yeah.
when I was sober and in the process of coming off all these drugs, like I had no idea how to be in the world, and the steps were just so incredibly clarifying for me, especially in terms of how fear had driven basically my entire life. And I was one of those people who did eventually realize this was just another identity box for me. I mean, like we're talking about, I'm all about pluralism. Like whatever works for you,
Yeah.
who the fuck am I to think I should have an opinion on that? For me, I did eventually realize that I wanted to just like live outside of any identity, any label, any definition at all. That being said, if I don't think I would have left the 12-step world if I didn't have, by the time I was 3 years sober, like this vibrant community of other patients who were in the withdrawal world. I think my call to be of service just happened to be in that realm of people who are trying to get off antidepressants and other meds. And so I was able to get out of myself and be there for others in that arena. If I didn't have that, I don't think I ever would have left AA. And to this day, I hold it fondly in my heart. And I haven't written about it yet much. I'm excited to, but I didn't drink for 10 years. And then for like I guess a few years ago, like I ended up like starting a relationship with alcohol again because I was just curious because I'd been a total booze bag, but I was on a ton of psych drugs when I'd been a booze bag. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm in a different place in my life. And
Yeah.
for me, it actually was a totally different experience. Like I couldn't have gotten myself drunk if I tried. Like my body was just wouldn't let me. But I did eventually. It didn't take me long before I realized, like, wow, even with having like a drink occasionally, I can feel the effects on my cognitive
Yeah.
function, on my sleep, on my
Yeah.
ability to manage stress. And so I stopped drinking again, and it was like no big. It was totally different to start it, to stop it. And then now I'm at a place in my life where, like, I'll have something here or there, but I just value what it feels like to be free of potent psychoactive chemicals, like, so
Yeah.
much for me. And like I imagine maybe you relate. Like my body was in a toxic stew for enough years. Like I want to be my, you know, my most clear-headed, capable, cognitively capable self in this
Yeah.
later chapters of my life.
Just in time for perimenopause to come and make you retarded. Look, guys, most of us struggle with weight loss. It's a very common problem. But if you truly want to lose weight in a way that is healthy for your body and get strong at the same time, nothing beats the Caliber app. The Caliber app is 100% free to get started, with the ability to upgrade to unlock more features or add a coach for one-on-one support. The free version of the app provides full ad-free access to the app's features, including over 500 exercises, workout tracking, and the ability to create custom exercises. From there, you can upgrade to Caliber Pro, which includes group coaching, or you can upgrade to Caliber Premium, which includes one-on-one coaching. I've said it before, but Caliber has been life-changing for me. Caliber makes weight and strength training simple and easy. The fact that I'm even doing it is a miracle. It was always so overwhelming and intimidating to me, and Caliber makes it so easy to get started. It gives you step-by-step instructions and even videos showing how to correctly perform the moves. So go check out the Caliber app today. Go to caliberstrong.com/Phetasy to see if any of their versions is right for you. That's caliberstrong.com/Phetasy to get started and get strong. The link is in the description below. I mean, this is something that I just celebrated 12 years, and I'm
Congrats.
not nearly as active as I was at all. Like, uh, I was very active, and I do think, like, it gets I know when I'm dry, I know that I know when, and it is spiritual.
Yeah.
One of the books that absolutely saved me in all of my, like, trying, because I went into rehab so young, and then I blamed rehab because there is this thing of, like, young people go into rehab, they meet a bunch of people who have done harder drugs than them. It's like prison, and now you have connections to those people, and you were just here like a lowly weed smoker, and you're like, "Well, I'm in rehab, so I might as well go all in and do meth now." And I saw that over and over again, just like a kid who got busted with weed, parents freaked out, put him with a bunch of frickin' junkies, and
Mm.
now you have a real problem. And so I got out and, of course, wanted to keep drinking and smoking weed and blamed the program, and I became very anti-AA. I wasn't just like, "Oh, to each their own." I was like, "Fuck that. It's based in fear. I'm never going back to those rooms." And I did everything in my power to avoid them. That's when I really went deep into therapy. I got certified in yoga because of course I did. I got
Is this the life coach era? No.
I was a life coach. Yep. I was also life coaching, and, I mean, everything. I did, like, I would try and, like, trip and whatever. This was pre-microdosing when you could just do drugs, and so it was I'm very grateful to those rooms, and I still find myself, and there were very hardcore versions. even within AA, there are hardcore versions where it's like nothing from the neck up. And I got into AA and I'd watch them shame people who are on antidepressants, because often you have someone get sober and they don't know that they're self-medicating, and they actually probably do need some kind of medication because they're a schizophrenic or whatever. And it was like the whole wild journey of going through that. One of the books that I came back to over and over again, which I'm still obsessed with and probably saved my life and definitely saved me from jumping on meds when I was uncomfortable, was called Care of the Soul. Have you
Mm.
ever read this book?
No.
It is so brilliant. It truly saved my life. It is all about how all of these like modern like depression is your soul trying to tell you you're something, and anxiety is your soul trying to tell you something else. And he talks about narcissism and all of these things that we've like diagnosed, and how it's really just fundamentally part of the human condition. And he uses mythology and talks about it. Is so brilliant.
Wow.
It's kind of dense actually, but it truly saved me.
Oh
It gave
gosh.
me the ability to go, okay, maybe I'm depressed because and this is like what I've come to learn. Now when I get anxiety, I'm lying to myself, lying to someone else, or someone's lying to me.
Mm.
Like that's it's usually around lying. If I'm getting anxiety, that like old anxiety that I got, that when I was in a relationship with my first husband and drinking, and we were doing tons of drugs, and I started getting panic attacks and I didn't know what they were. I'd never even heard of I probably had heard of them in passing, but I was not like over in that. We were 5 kids. Some of this stuff too, I wonder, which I do want to get your opinion on, is like how much of it is class. Because I don't know that middle class and poor kids, they might have access to like, we'll try this, we'll try that, we'll try this, we'll try that, we'll put her on this, we'll go to this psychiatrist. Like people who have the resources to try everything to fix you, they're like, go play. Life
Yeah.
isn't fair. Go play. Like that was our therapy.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, that book, I mean, I recommend this book to people all the time when they're really struggling, because I walked in sobriety year 2 right up to very, very bad depression. And I think it was my brain coming off of weed, like just rewiring after alcoholism. I've been drinking and smoking since I was like 12,
Yeah.
and I'm 35. It was 35 when I got sober, and walked right up to it. And I remember talking to my therapist being like, maybe we should, like I was suffering. And I was like, maybe we should consider meds. And it was really right at that moment that w- the breakthrough happened. Like something happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my brain just kind of came back online. And I haven't experienced, knock on wood, I'm not saying I'm not susceptible to it, especially, with hormones and being a woman, and life, but knock on wood, I haven't had that depression overtake me in the same way ever since. And had I jumped to getting on meds, I would have like missed that
Yeah.
miracle.
Yeah. It's so yeah, when you've grown up, or even if you this happens in adulthood, but when you're under the influence of psychoactive chemicals for years and years and years and years, it's I mean, first of all, those drugs themselves in many ways like block you from getting to the root, like whatever it was that led you to seek relief in the first place. So there's that piece that you're never actually like addressing, facing, moving through the original wound or whatever it might be that led you into using these drugs. But when you're on psychoactive chemicals, like when they're coursing through your brain and blood and body day after day, year after year, it's so hard to know what your baseline is, like who you
Yes.
truly are off of it. And I think this is also the case with psychiatric drugs. Like a lot of people who get these chronic diagnoses, who are kind of perceived by the world around them as, chronic bipolar people or chronic schizophrenics, even like I often find myself wondering, like I'll share a story. When I was working in the mental health system for a few years, I worked as an advocate in the public mental health system. And then I'll get back to your class question because it very much ties into this. But I was working as an advocate, and I was spending a lot of time in group homes and emergency rooms. And I'd hang out with these dudes who were in their mid 50s, and their teeth were falling out, and they carried around their 2-liter sodas, and they chain smoked, and the knife drawer in the group home kitchen was locked, and it was just the most kind of infantilizing existence where they were just totally disabled, completely unable to take care of themselves, and completely dependent on all the staff around them. And the world perceived them as these chronic, mentally ill, crazy people. And they were all loaded up on tons of meds. And I remember sitting down, I talk about him in my book. I remember sitting down with one of them and asking him, like, what was happening? Well, first I asked him, when were you first hospitalized? And he said, oh, I was a teenager, and I'd smoked some bad grass, and I started seeing insects come out of the television, and I told my parents, and they were really scared, so they took me to the hospital. And then he was like literally locked up as like the 16-year-old boy on an adult unit for 2 years and diagnosed schizophrenic. And then that began
crazy.
his career as a group home patient, basically. And I asked, like, I could tell that no one had ever asked him that question. Like, he was almost confused by it. And it occurred to me in meeting him and so many other people in these public systems who have been there for decades, who are basically forgotten and given up on, that, these were people who were once, innocent children who had bad things happen to them, who had their needs not met, or who had a lot of stuff done to them that should never have been done to them. And they never got what they needed to work through it. They were just kind of institutionalized, and the rest is history. And so I think when it comes to like perceiving people who look to the outside world like they're just, these disabled, dysfunctional, chronic mental patients, like there's always a story. It always started somewhere. And I think the theme is that it's a story of people who didn't get what they needed. And like the fact that you had that period where you were like, maybe I need to go on meds, but you stayed with it. And whether it was a combination of, your body healing from long-term psychoactive chemicals or working through whatever else you might have worked through, people need a chance to move through. And that doesn't mean they don't need help and support. But what happened to me and what happened to so many people in my orbit these days, like former psychiatric patients, is that we didn't have the chance to move through and to make sense of what our pain meant, and that it was a response to life. Mm-hmm. And I think my view on the mental health industry is that it does not discriminate by class. As a person who grew up in an affluent family, I had access to the so-called best of the best, and definitely I think a lot of like interventions that probably would not have happened if my parents didn't have the means to pay for them. But that being said, poor people, foster kids, there's like a whole nother way that the mental health system medicates lower socioeconomic. Yeah. And it's usually behavior control. And race too. Like black men are far more likely to be given a schizophrenia diagnosis than any other population. Like, so it is a class thing. It's a race thing. It's definitely tied into behavior control, I think. And because the mental health system is about much more than a psych hospital or a therapy office. It's infused schools, public schools. They're clinics now. It's infused, like telehealth. It's much more accessible, I think, than it's ever been. And you don't need to be wealthy to be psychiatrized.
It's everywhere in our language now too. It's just, it's the way we interpret the world. And even so much of the language from like the last decade, trigger alerts and safe spaces and all this stuff. This is all therapy talk. This is all like, it was like we would joke on Dumpster Fire when we'd see a lot of these videos from colleges. I'm like, have you ever wanted a struggle session and group therapy? Like, that's basically what's going on these campuses. Like, it's a weird mix of just, it starts like therapy and then turns into a struggle session. You're like, what is happening right now? The like apologies, and it's
Totally.
all it feels like I feel like I could hear our ancestors just being like, "You guys are soft."
Totally.
Just like, and it's interesting coming from grandparents who were literally alive and fought in World War II. So they and when my grandfather came back from World War II, there was not even a term for PTSD. They just were like, "Oh, he's shell shocked." Like, I read his letters constantly that he sent home, and it is insane what these men
Yep.
went through, and then we're just shipped back out.
Yep.
He's like, "Well, we got bombed off one carrier, and now we're back. They gave us a couple of days, and now we're back out there. Like,
Yep.
too bad Johnny didn't make it, my
Yep.
best friend." And came
Yep.
home, didn't talk about it, became a lot
Yep.
alcoholics, internalized a lot of it, had a lot of problems in their families, marriages because of it. And then I feel like there was I think of how quickly this is taken on, like, and I go down these crazy late night rabbit holes of just finding weird shit online, and it's like the kids who are switching on YouTube, they're like, "Oh, I have, Tourette's," or "I have," and they're videotaping themselves, and they're, switching they have multiple
Yep.
personalities, but it's like,
DID, dissociative
are you
identity
just, like,
disorder.
yeah, are you just performing this for YouTube clicks, which is crazy. So,
Yep.
in not very long, we've gone from literally no term for PTSD, which I think isn't necessary. I was talking to my friend last night because he was like, "Oh, no, it's not depression, it's it's PTSD," and then my girlfriend and I were talking, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds much better, like, more badass than depression." And she was like, "Yeah, PTSD is when you've earned it." And I was like, "You've earned your depression." I was like, "Oh, that's such a great joke."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I have veteran friends
yeah.
who came back from combat and were, the VA, talk about a med pusher. I mean, you come home, you're told you're gonna be disabled for the rest of your life. Here are, like, 13 different psych meds, and, just basically accept that you're gonna be, um, unable to function. But my friends who, some of them came back and did buy into all of that for a while, but what they now realize is actually the 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 traits that helped me survive war, that actually were a sign of what a good, what an effective, soldier I was, which is, being, like, hyper vigilant and, quick to change your focus, like paranoid, whatever the traits are. When you come back to regular culture and you're just expected to, like, in the snap of a finger, fit back in, of course you're gonna look disordered. But
Right.
but the problem isn't inside of them, like an illness in their brain. Again, it's about their relationship to the culture around them. And because we don't, like, whether it was the World War II, um, dudes coming back, or, people coming back from the Middle East today, it's like we don't build bridges for
No, there's no
them.
reintegration.
Totally. There's nothing.
We do it
And
for fucking Burning Man people, like, they have their, like their, like, reintegration back into society after the burn. We can't even do it for our soldiers, like, we should
no.
send the soldiers to Burning Man as
And then
reintegration. back into. I can't imagine going from war to a fucking barbecue. I would kill
Seriously.
myself. I
Oh
would
my
kill
gosh.
myself.
Totally. And so they
You're just there with a
internalized.
fucking beer in a bouncy house after you were just being shot at and had to like murder a family. Like, who knows whatever hell they had to see. And now
Totally.
you're just like,
Well,
well, I gotta be normal.
and the secrets that they're expected to carry, that you can't talk about the
Yeah.
horrors. First of all, that you have to
Yeah.
face the horrors that you may have had to
The
participate
moral
in.
injury.
Yeah, totally. And that I think
Yep.
is where the medicalization piece is so distorting, because you know, the PTSD label, like, sure, at least it acknowledges your response. It acknowledges trauma, like you're having a response to trauma. But even internalizing this idea that the problem is inside of you, like you are the one with the disorder, rather than
Right.
like the fucking like foreign policy of our, you know, country, or the you know, the problems in our culture. I think that's where the distorting effects of this medicalized language really come into play. And gosh, you were saying something really thoughtful earlier. I can't remember what it was. Hopefully it will come back. Uh, what you had been, I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was so good. What were we talking about before the
Burning Man?
veterans, before the Burning Man reintegration idea for vets?
Just how quickly we were mainstream, like the culture shifted.
I remember. Yes, that's it. So this whole phenomenon you're talking about of, you know, like kids on YouTube or Twitch or wherever showing their disorders, to me, what this all, at the root of this phenomenon of the, you know, kind of therapeuticization and like romanticization of these diagnoses in our culture, is that young people are searching for a sense of who they are and how they fit in to this really confusing, like oftentimes fucked up culture that we're in. And right now, what is most visible to them as a framework to make sense of themselves is the mental health system, it's the diagnoses, and it's the treatments, and it's the sense of worth you can feel for, like, I don't have just one diagnosis, I have 5, and they're in my X handle. See? And I remember feeling that way. Like, I was, as an elder millennial, I was kind of the beginning of this phenomenon. Like, I remember later 90s, early 2000s, actually walking around McLean Hospital, where I had a lot of my treatment, and being so fucking proud that Susanna Kaysen, who wrote Girl Interrupted, and like Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, they were all patients here. Like, I am so proud to be here. And and
Yeah,
it was because
exactly.
where else did I belong? I didn't see any
Right.
other space in our culture to find meaning. And that's, I think, a big part of the problem, is that we're in a crisis of meaning, a spiritual crisis, and young people don't see another place to make sense of who they are. They just see all these diagnoses and this identity of being basically like crazy. So I feel
And
for
it's a
them.
cheat code. You can just slap on
Yep.
an identity. You don't
Yep.
need to actually, I mean, I use partying, so not great, and being promiscuous. And that was when I gave up on actually trying to develop anything, because my parents got divorced and then I got lost. But I was very, very lost for a long time. And I
Yep.
thought that was just because I was a teenager or whatever. But then I realized there were a lot of kids who weren't lost. Like, there were a lot of good kids who had they just weren't as lost as I was. Some of it is probably just a function of who I am. Some of it is circumstances I had no control over. I moved all the time. So some of it is definitely that. I became a chameleon, and I thought it was normal to be lost. And then I just leaned into being lost. And then when I got tired of having to work through that identity crisis, I leaned into being a party girl, and I
Yep.
rode that shit into the frickin' ground
Oh yeah.
until basically I was like, this is not a good look anymore.
Yeah. Like, I
And then
might
kept
actually
going.
die.
Yeah, I mean, I should have died.
Yep.
I should have died, and not just in many horrific ways there were a lot of ways that and many better people than me did die for doing actually a lot less reckless, insane shit than I did. And they did die. Like
Yeah.
they were, I mean, that phrase that you hear all the time in the rooms there, but for the grace of God go I think about that daily.
Me
Even when
too.
I'm down on 6th Street and I see a homeless junkie and their weird zombie bent over position that they're all in now, and I'm like, "That very easily could have been me."
Yeah.
And still could be to a certain degree. There is a timeline where that is absolutely who I am. And I think that that is one of the things that we often, like, you brought it up early, where the people who are in these institutions and all the homelessness, where you're like, "Well, is this like a truly crazy person? Is this a crazy person who just needs a home and shelter and to get sober?" And getting sober is really hard because
Yep.
you don't have any coping mechanisms. And if you're
Yep.
like you and I and most people who end up as, like, drug addicts very young, you've used these things as coping mechanisms. I always say it is a absolute miracle that anyone gets sober ever at all, period. Because
Yep.
there's that, like, gateway that talk about, like, reintegration, the gateway between drug addiction or even being addicted to benzos or on on meds and
Yep.
into finding that baseline is the dark night of the soul level treacherous.
Yep. And there's so few, I mean, that journey, when you're alone in it, it's so hard to keep going, like not having visible spaces where you can
You can't do it alone.
you totally can. And God bless AA and 12-step programs for the people for whom they work, but they're not the right fit for everyone. And I think about that often, like, where else in our culture is there a place where for free you can show up like any day of the week, multiple times a day, and have a space where you can wear your heart on your sleeve and pour out your pain and talk about all your fears and talk about the things that you're the most ashamed of and be held with love and compassion and support than the 12-step world. Like, there isn't another place. It's,
I mean, church, maybe. I know a lot of people have gotten sober through church and like changed their life through church, but you're right. It's not like there's I can pick up my app and be in a meeting in an hour if I need
Yep.
to be.
Yep. Yeah.
And that people don't understand, like, how amazing it is that they give that is given to you freely,
Yep.
and sponsorship and all these things where
Yep.
people are listening to you, like, lose your fucking mind in early sobriety.
Yep.
And
I will never forget sitting with my sponsor when I read when I read my fourth step to her, which took like 7 hours, and she was super pregnant, and she sat there in the chair across from me for like the entire day as I just read
yeah.
it out. Um, and yeah, it's such a gift. And you're right, for sure, for people who have strong religious faith, like that can definitely be a source of comfort and support. But I do think maybe this is changing now, but when I was researching, when I was researching my book, and I was looking at the decline in religious faith in the second half of the 20th century, and I was looking at the rise of the therapy industry, and I remember actually finding, I think it was in the 50s, it was an international conference of mental health professionals who had gathered at the Vatican, and and a religious leader, I can't remember which one in the church it was, basically said something along the lines of, that the territory of the mind is for you. And it was almost giving, permission to the mental health professionals, like, you all take this, like, we're not doctors, basically, was the kind of vibe of this speech that was given. And I do think that and I say this in my book too, when I think about my relationship to all my lovely, kind therapists who I had over the years, it was a kind of a confession, the sacrament of my pills. It kind of replaced what maybe could have been some kind of religious faith for me had I grown up in a different situation. And I think for a lot of people, therapy has taken the place of what otherwise might have been a source of religious faith that could open up community like that they otherwise don't have access to. But maybe that's changing. I feel like I read a stat that you probably saw this somewhere. I saw it somewhere on X. Like this is the first time in I don't know how long that young people are praying more often than their parents.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So
Is
something's
like,
changing.
is there a world in which you got good treatment and it worked and you got into a stable, loving relationship and didn't need it anymore? Like, is there a world in which that is the case?
Well, I think in my case, I don't think had I been sent to a therapist when I was 13 who basically looked at me and said, like, you're waking up and you're actually, this is like a sign of wisdom that you're recognizing how bullshit and arbitrary, like all these social expectations on your shoulders, if I had a therapist who actually helped me recognize that my suffering was a sign of my power and my sensitivity and my intuition, then totally therapy could have helped me. And I don't think I ever would have needed anything further. That, and to play another kind of timeline out, like had I not had that and I did end up on meds, maybe if I had taken them short term, I know a lot of people, I think you were saying it earlier, you have a really tough chapter and you start something and you're on it maybe for a couple months and you feel better. You feel like you can access more of yourself and then you have a good plan to taper off it. Maybe things would have looked differently too for me if I'd had more short-term use of the various meds I was on. But yeah, I wouldn't change any of it. Like I am so grateful for every single experience I had, and including the most degrading. Like I earlier when you were talking, I was thinking about how interesting it is that we had these quite parallel, in many ways, like parallel trajectories as girls and young women who, could have been given all kinds of derogatory labels for our behaviors. For me, because I saw all my bad behaviors as symptoms of, I'm manic. So like, it's not my fault that I just like did this crazy thing with this guy or like scaled up this building and now I'm stuck on the roof and I'm so shit-faced I don't know how to get off. Like I'm manic. I wouldn't change any of it because I think it helped me coming so intimately in touch with what a life not worth living felt like, and actually trying to kill myself.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of my story. Like I almost died of an intentional overdose. Like I'm really fucking lucky. Like you, I'm really, by the grace of God, go I, or whatever it is. I wouldn't change any of it because it's helped clarify for me what actually does matter in my life, which is not the absence of pain. It's a sense of meaning and purpose and understanding my emotional pain as a response, as a signal that's trying to communicate something to me. I don't think I ever would have come to these realizations if I hadn't become a like long-term professional mental patient personally. So I'm grateful for it. And I think I say that when people reach out and they feel like what they're going through is in vain or it's wasted time or God, I'm like off track, I'm behind. I've been a psych patient for the past 10 years. I just say to them, there is so much meaning in what you've been through, and none of this is wasted time. You're just on your way to finding out like what this is all meant to be turned into as an offering to the world. Like I really think, and it's part of why you have such an impact with your audience, I think, because you take your own darkness that you've been through and you turn it into comedy and you turn it into connections through your shows, and like that makes it all worth it to me when we can make art basically out of our pain.
It's still so there. Like not there in the same way. When I think of like that girl that was in rehab and I read her journals, it is like a different person. It is just, it's like and this is the thing that I wish someone would have told me when I was a teen. Not that the problem when you're a teen is you don't listen to shit.
Yeah, totally.
You're just like, I know everything. I'm not listening to you. You're old. What are you talking about? And But I don't remember anyone ever saying, like, "You're going to grow up and not even recognize this person. This person will be almost alien." She's kind of alien to me in a weird way.
Mm.
I
I mean, did you even
recognize
think about your future when you were a teen? Like, I feel like I didn't even think the long game
I mean,
through.
I know I've, like, written it's weird because, my birthday's coming up, and there's no fucking way that I ever thought I was gonna live this long at all. Like, there's just
Were you meant to be in the
no
28 club? I thought I would be.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna die like a legend, and
Totally.
it is like my stand-up, like, if you had told me that I was gonna be a Texas suburban mom when I got sober, even at 35, which was already
Geriatric mom, woo.
way longer than I thought I was gonna live, I would have been like, "I'm gonna go overdose on heroin now," because I had such, like, delusions of I mean, it's tough being an artist. You've gotta be delusional to a certain level in order to even make it because it's a very unrealistic path
Mhm.
and it's not even based in reality, it's just your imagination. So, I think that trying to wrestle with a lot of that, and then, yeah, there was a lot of other stuff tied around that with, yeah, just a lot, just so much, and I feel like I just kind of always keep moving forward like a shark, and then every once in a while, and I don't have time lately to think about that stuff, which is good, but I don't know, like that undertow of for me in early sobriety, it was just like I felt like such a loser,
Mhm.
and the past couple days, I don't know if it's hormonal or there's some things going on that are making me, doubt myself and just this feeling of insecurity that I cannot shake, and I hate feeling insecure. I run from it.
Yep.
And just last night, I was like, "Ah, I wish I could just fucking drink." And I haven't felt that way in a while. So that even having that thought, I'm sober enough to know, like, "Oh, you're in a not bet you're in a place that you need to, like, sit with.
Yep.
Like, there's something going on that you have to sit with this
Yep.
discomfort." I wanted
Yep.
to be out of discomfort, and but I also know how to shift it too, so today I got on my Peloton and I just rode until I felt sane or some semblance of sane or
Yep.
some like, people don't realize how we do have the most powerful chemically what is it? Like a pharmaceutical company in our own brain.
Yep.
And to just get on a bike and raise my heart rate and struggle a little bit, it will shift my perspective enough and exercise some of that like crazy or whatever it is. And I can breathe and settle down and feel I don't know, maybe not necessarily confident, but not like there's still this, like it was like I ran from that loser feeling my whole life, and then it hit me at 35, and I still feel like I didn't allow myself to go through that at 12, 13 years old,
Yep.
and I delayed it. I kicked the can down the road, but the bill is always gonna come due with that stuff, and I still feel that, like, undertow sometimes of, like, "Why do I feel like a teenage girl?" Like,
Totally. Oh my
this
gosh,
is
I
ridiculous.
re I relate so much. Yeah, people often think, that the end of my story is that now I'm happy and everything's great and my life is put together and I'm balanced and it was all one bad dream back there and I'm like I must disappoint you. Like I am as dark and twisted and, intense a person as always. I'm the same, angry, sensitive little girl that I was, and I mean, I definitely have healed a lot from all the pharmaceuticals, which totally and all the lifestyle. I ate
Yeah.
like Splenda and like fat-free turkey slices for like 10 years. So the amount of shit I put my body through, I definitely healing from all of that helped change a lot, but I'm still the same me. I'm really intense and sensitive and I'm quick to distrust. I'm primed to get paranoid about things. I think just because of how I grew up, growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, where it's literally like the Stepford Wives were based on, I think, New Canaan, which is next door. Like you could not trust what you were seeing around you. Everything looked perfect and
Connecticut's
beautiful.
fucking crazy.
It is so it's like the randomest, craziest state. And so
it's so crazy. My sister works for all these people, and I keep begging her to write a version of her version of the help, because she's an organizer for like all of these wealthy people. Yeah.
That would be the
And I'm
best.
like,
That should be a show.
dude, you need to write this. Like, it is, and they're all influencers.
Oh my gosh.
The stories my sister tells me are beyond anything. Like, anything that you would imagine being a pair. It should be like a Silicon Valley comedy of like Connecticut rich wives of finance dudes who are also influencers.
So you should that's brilliant. And yeah, it is. It's, so when you grow up in that environment, it is really hard to trust anything or anyone. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel a lot of pain today on a regular basis. And especially, because we have our kids are similar ages. Like I'm almost 5 years in to being a mother. And I mean, I have my stepson who I've known for much longer, but since giving birth. And it's been, I would say, like in many ways, the hardest chapter of my life, because I'm so in touch with my pain and I'm not running away from it. I'm not out of it and like completely like drugged up and medicated and drunk or whatever else. And so I would say the main difference in my life today is not the absence of pain. It's that I'm not afraid of it. And I'm like, I love how you put it, this undertow, like, I've always thought about it as my dark companion, like this idea of this darkness that's like in me, kind of right here, and it just comes along with me, almost like a Miyazaki movie, like one of those like cute giant black, gremlins that's like quiet but kind of scary and just always there. And sometimes it's really
also
loud.
kind of cute.
Yeah, but also totally cute. And I think to me, like the big trick in consumerist culture today is that when you feel pain, it's A, something you should be afraid of, and B, something you should fix. And like sometimes, like you said, you do need to take action. Like I'm in front of a screen 8 hours, I feel completely like fried and irritable. Get outside, Laura. Close the screen. You do have to take action. But sometimes you just feel it and you move through it and you realize how powerful you are. And for those of us who grew up psychiatrized, like that's what this journey really is about. It's about coming back into your own power and ability to be with yourself without trying to like do anything to change it.
Is that how like is that how your self-perception has changed the most? What has changed the most in your
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think the definitely letting go of this idea that when I'm feeling intense mental or emotional pain, it means there's something wrong with me. That doesn't mean I'm not like a total bitch to my husband sometimes, and I can really fuck up and hurt and make mistakes. But it doesn't mean there's something defective in me. That's been a big shift. I think an even bigger shift, and I don't know if this ever was your experience too, but somehow in early childhood, I got it in my mind that I was an evil person, that I was evil, like at a moral level. And I was just trying to, I was good at convincing everyone and tricking everyone into thinking I wasn't. And I was even tricking myself. I lived with that belief through like way into quitting, booze and all that. I think letting go of that, which I can't explain exactly how I did, that's been the biggest shift. Like, I don't think I'm an evil person anymore.
Are you religious?
I don't have an organized faith, but I do believe in God very much. And I actually think I may be on a journey towards some kind of faith. I don't know what yet, but I feel a hungering for something more. What about you?
Same. I've been joking that since I moved to Texas, when we first moved here, I was like, oh, I'm going to be one of those girls that has like a cross around my neck and is like, you've got to find the light of Jesus in your heart. Like, that is probably the path for me. But I'm a cradle Catholic, so it's in me. They squirted that stuff into my brain. That sounds dirtier than it is, especially since I'm talking about Catholicism, but they just got that in there early. So there's a lot of the Catholic guilt. There's like, I didn't feel like I was evil. I always feel like there's a great Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that just summarizes my belief in God for most of my life. And Calvin is talking to Hobbes, and Hobbes asks him, "Calvin, do you believe in God?" And then they take a beat. It's like an empty frame where they're just staring out. They're sitting on a hill. And then Calvin's like, "Well, someone's out to get me." And I'm like, that is my belief in a higher power in a nutshell from when I was a child. I always felt like I was going to be punished. I was worried that I would get AIDS for having sex. The shame and sexuality was
Yep.
so deeply intertwined and fucked up, frankly, for just so long. It is actually a miracle that I even have a normal relationship to sex at all that's healthy and loving and intimate. I couldn't do intimacy. I thought it was creepy. It was just like it was um so I moved away from it, and then coming back into the program, you're around it, and I had to actually do a lot of work. I had an amazing sponsor, and she introduced me to, oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on his name, but I couldn't even hear the Lord's Prayer without flinching. It just made me like tense up. And she had me read this book that broke down the Lord's Prayer and why it's managed to stand the test of time. And then slowly I kind of allowed it, you know, I'm not in the business of, I had to come to terms with AA in the same way. I'm not in the business of like pulling life rafts out from under people. Like you were saying earlier, it's not, if meds are what's saving you. I think the human condition is insane, frankly. Like it is the craziest stuff. It's so crazy how we can be, I have a friend going through she's very publicly going through this intense crazy cancer diagnosis of her 19-year-old daughter, and 2 days ago she was worrying about like her comedy. It's like you can be focusing on the most petty, mundane, dumb stuff, and then your life will change in an instant.
Yep.
And that is the terrifying reality that we all live with. And it's also why I think we do focus on the petty, because if you were to contemplate how fragile and delicate this all is all the time, you would go mad. But I
Totally.
also think back in the day, people had a lot more time to contemplate this, and they had a lot more space
Yep.
to walk in nature and be silent and bored. And so they were able to create great art and create a lot of thinking around this. And that was their escape, was creating this stuff. And they had more religion and probably didn't have as many alternatives like we do to God.
Yep.
So the long answer is not anything formal, but I feel like I'm shopping, like church shopping. I think the Charlie Kirk thing like really messed me up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Oh
definitely
gosh.
one of
Yeah.
those people that was like, I need God. Like
Yep.
that. It was just like, I need God in my life. But that's been unfolding for a decade since I got sober.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't really know where it will lead. I've had a lot of people over the years be like, I just hope you find Jesus.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I relate so much to that. And I'm just thinking about how, like you said, life, it's so unspeakably beyond our control, beyond whether that means through actually, determining what happens to us or understanding what's happening. There's just so much inevitable mystery, uncertainty, unpredictability. And I think in many ways, like my this long, meditation I've been in with my pain that led me into the mental health system, and took me a really long time to get out of the mental health system. At a deeper level, it's about my relationship to the unknown, and just how, like you said, in the snap of a finger, like this, profoundly life-altering thing can happen at any moment. And sometimes I think that those of us who get psychiatrized are we get psychiatrized because we're maybe spending a little too much time facing that abyss of powerlessness and uncertainty and unknowability, and we just hang at that edge a little too long, and then next thing you know, there we are in a psych ward, or with 3 pill bottles on our bed, on our kitchen counter, or whatever it might be. And I do think it is about what it means to be human, really, at its heart, which is about what it means to be in relationship to your own powerlessness over life. And in this digital consumerist, like fast-paced era we're in, there isn't space to contemplate that, and we just move through our day. Like before we went live, you're like, how's your day been? I'm like, I've just been like one thing to the next. I literally haven't been outside today. Like, I don't know how cold it is outside.
Yeah.
And we aren't designed for this. Like, we aren't meant to be kept from contemplation in this way. And I shouldn't say kept from, because I'm choosing that. I could be making different choices. So we have more power than we realize. But
well, hopefully you have time for a walk. What's your biggest defect of character?
My anger. Yeah. I think it's also my biggest asset too, though.
That's the next question.
Yeah. The shadow side is my defect, and catalyzing it and turning it into art or an offering for someone else is my best asset, I think.
And where can we find you in your book?
You can find me at lauradelano.com. You can find my book, Unshrunk, at unshrunkthebook.com. And if you are looking to learn more about safe tapering and about a lot of the stuff we talked about, you can find the nonprofit that I founded, Inner Compass Initiative, at theinnercompass.org. We have tons of free resources and community for people who are rethinking their relationship to meds. And it's not anti-med. Again, it's about informed choice.
I love that. I always say we need like a 12-step program for normies.
Totally.
Like in so many ways, I'm grateful because I daily return to this. It's and it's so ingrained in me now. Like the other day I was agitated. I'm like, all right, pause, I'm doubtful, pause. Okay. Confront this. Don't hang on to this. Somebody was talking to me about grievance politics, and they were like, well, aren't all politics grievance? I'm like, I don't have that luxury. I can't like live in resentment. It will be my undoing. So I have to focus on what I can build and what I can control, not on like, sure, I can use that as a catalyst, and there are things that make me angry, but I cannot live in like perpetual resentment and victimhood. I will start drinking again, and it will be bad.
Totally.
And it's also just not, like you said, the biggest gift is I never knew that baseline. I just never knew it. Not since I was probably 10 years old, 11 years old was the last time I had a real baseline. And then you go through puberty, but I added chemicals to that, and then it was just off to the races. So being able to have that baseline now for over a decade, you do become quite attuned to, oh, I'm depressed, and it's because my husband always says something. It's either because I'm doing something I shouldn't or not doing something that I should.
Yep.
It's like there are these little signposts that are like, hey, you're ignoring this aspect of your soul. And I've been so panicked about writing a book because I have so much crap around it. And I was like, just one day at a time, and get out of your own way and sit down and do the number of words, and treat it like everything else that I do, working out, writing, everything, marriage, show up, like do your best to get out of your way for however many moments you need to do so. And And that has been all a gift of the baseline, or you're getting in touch with that inner compass.
Yeah, totally. What a nice way to end it.
Yeah, thank you so
Oh my
much.
gosh.
Go for
Thanks
a
so much
walk.
for having me. Yeah,
It was amazing.
fresh air is my next
Yes.
action item for sure.
Me
Thank you
too.
so
I don't
much for
think I've
having
been
me,
outside
Bridget.
either. Yeah, thank you for being here. I hope everyone gets your book, and if you are someone who is in the darkness, here are 2 very living examples of people who made it out and probably shouldn't have.
Indeed. Just hang in there. There is a way through, and you are so far from alone with it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.